AI moves fast. But every once in a while, something happens that makes even scientists stop and say, wait, what just happened? Because this time, AI didn't just improve an existing tool. It cracked problems humans had been stuck on for nearly a century. And the surprising part is where it happened. Not in language, not in images, but inside pure mathematics, a domain ruled by proofs, intuition, and decades of accumulated human insight. What you're about to hear isn't hype. It's what happens when machines begin exploring scientific spaces that are simply too large for the human mind to navigate. And it's not limited to math. Physics and biology have also seen century-old barriers fall in the last few years because of AI. But let's start with a breakthrough that caught mathematicians completely off guard, because it shows exactly how different this new era of discovery is becoming. At the center of this story is something called the Andrews-Curtis conjecture. It was introduced in 1965, and for decades, it's been one of those problems that sits in the background of mathematics, quietly resisting every attempt to fully understand it. A useful way to picture the conjecture is to imagine an abstract Rubik's Cube, but instead of colors and physical moves, you're working with algebraic expressions and a small set of allowed transformations. The conjecture claims that no matter how complicated your starting configuration is, there should always be a sequence of valid moves that simplifies it back to a standard form. On the surface, that sounds manageable, but in practice, mathematicians kept finding configurations that refused to simplify. These became known as potential counterexamples. Some of them were studied for decades, 25, 30, even 40 years, without anyone being able to reduce them. And the core problem wasn't just intelligence, it was scale. The number of possible transformation paths explodes so quickly that no human can reason through them. Some valid sequences require thousands or even millions of steps. Traditional computers didn't help either, because brute force search is impossible. There are more possible paths than atoms on Earth. So these problems just sat there, unresolved, waiting, until an AI system solved them. Earlier this year, a team at Caltech built a reinforcement learning system specifically designed to operate in this kind of overwhelming search space. Instead of randomly trying transformations, the system learned patterns. It started with simple cases and slowly developed what researchers describe as a kind of mathematical instinct. Over time, the AI discovered long chains of transformations that humans had never identified. The researchers called these super moves. Each one was actually a compressed bundle of smaller steps that the system learned were useful again and again. The training process looked a lot like leveling up. The AI solved easy problems first, then progressively harder ones. And once it understood certain structures deeply enough, it began exploring rare paths that humans had never seriously considered. It wasn't trying to solve the entire conjecture. It was probing the hardest corners, the exact places where mathematicians had been stuck for decades. And that's when the breakthrough happened. The AI successfully simplified entire families of long-standing potential counterexamples. These were cases that had resisted human effort for 20 to 40 years. The system reduced them back to the standard form, showing that they were not counterexamples at all. The full conjecture is still open, but a massive portion of its most stubborn cases are now resolved. This is historic for a simple reason. It's the first time a machine has carried out deep, multi-thousand step reasoning in abstract mathematics without being explicitly guided by humans. It didn't just assist, it discovered. And that matters because it shows AI is beginning to explore mathematical spaces the human mind cannot realistically navigate. Now, before we move on to physics, a quick note for creators watching. There's a new AI tool called Overseer OS that can reverse engineer any YouTube channel and show exactly what's driving growth and engagement. There's a free link in the description if you want to explore it. Now, let's talk about physics. If the math story wasn't surprising enough, something similar has been happening in fluid dynamics, a field that's been studied for more than a century. Equations like Euler and Navier-Stokes describe how fluids move. Air over a wing, waves in the ocean, smoke, turbulence, weather systems. These equations govern enormous parts of the physical world. One of the biggest unanswered questions in the field is whether these equations can produce a blow-up, a point where velocity becomes infinite in a finite amount of time. The problem is so important that the Clay Mathematics Institute made it a $1 million Millennium Prize problem. Earlier this year, DeepMind built a physics-informed AI system trained directly on the equations themselves, not on simulated data, but on the structure of the math. When researchers applied it to the three-dimensional Euler equations, the AI began identifying singularities that humans had never discovered. It found new families of unstable blowups, including one that appears to arise from a single scale parameter. That simplicity matters. It suggests there may be hidden structure inside equations that have been studied since the early 1900s. These weren't just speculative results. Mathematicians followed up with computer-assisted proofs, and several of the AI-discovered singularities held up under rigorous verification. That's why people in the field took notice. Because if these structures are real, we may be closer to understanding the Navier-Stokes problem than anyone expected. And this matters far beyond theory. These equations determine how aircraft fly, how storms form, how climate models behave. Turbulence is one of the hardest problems in classical physics. When AI starts uncovering new behaviors inside these equations, it changes what's possible to understand and predict. Biology tells a similar story. For decades, one of the hardest problems in biology was protein folding. A protein starts as a long chain of amino acids, but the way it folds into a three-dimensional shape determines what it does in the body. Determining that shape experimentally can take months or years, and predicting it from sequence alone stumped researchers for nearly half a century. That changed in 2020 when DeepMind released AlphaFold. AlphaFold achieved near experimental accuracy during the CASP Protein Prediction Challenge. Since then, it has predicted structures for more than 200 million proteins, essentially every known protein found in nature. With AlphaFold 3, the system can now model full molecular complexes, predicting how proteins interact with DNA, RNA, and small molecules. That matters because real biology isn't isolated components. It's networks of interactions. The impact has been immediate. Researchers in pharma, genetics, and structural biology now use these predictions to accelerate work that once took years. AlphaFold didn't solve biology, but it removed a massive bottleneck that had been holding entire fields back. So why is this happening now? When you line up breakthroughs in math, physics, and biology, a clear pattern emerges. AI isn't just computing faster, it's discovering structure in spaces where human intuition fails. Traditional science relies on insight combined with trial and error, but century-old problems often live in spaces too vast for humans to explore. Reinforcement learning lets AI build extremely long chains of reasoning. Physics-informed models keep it grounded in reality. High-dimensional representations let it move through complexity without collapsing. The result is that entire scientific landscapes are becoming accessible for the first time. This doesn't make human scientists obsolete. It expands what science can study. And if this trend continues, the next wave of breakthroughs may come from humans and machines working together in domains that were previously unreachable. If you made it this far, let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want to explore Overseer OS, the link is in the description. For more deep dives like this, watch the recommended video on screen now. Thanks for watching.